Hello guys, this video will be focusing on counting atoms, and counting atoms shows us how many of each type of atom there is in a bond. For example, in a bond there's 4 hydrogens or 6 oxygens. How do people know how many atoms are there in a bond? Well, it's through counting atoms. And we count using the subscript under each element, and if there's a coefficient or bracket, distribute it to the coefficients via multiplication, and I'll get to the details during the lesson. So let's go through a very simple example first. We all know what H2O is, okay? H2O is water, okay? And what I mean by subscript is that it's the number under an element, okay? So here we see 2 under hydrogen, which tells us that there's going to be 2 hydrogens in this bond. And when you see an element without a subscript, you assume there's an invisible one. So which tells you there's 1 oxygen, okay? But what do we do when there's brackets? So when there's like a bracket outside a compound, right? It's like a subscript under a subscript. It looks funny and it may be intimidating, but we can just break it down and simplify that. And as I said earlier, you distribute the numbered subscript of the bracket to each of the elements. So by multiplication. So we know that. So P here, there's no subscript, which means that there's only 1, and there's 3 oxygens. So distributing the 2 means we multiply 2 times 3 is 6, 2 times 1 is 2. So we're gonna end up with 2 phosphorus and 6 oxygens. Okay. When we have like a coefficient in front of a like a many compounds here, when you have like a coefficient, you can also distribute it to each of the sort of compounds behind it. Most people sort of get confused in this by assuming that this 3 belongs to the Na only, and they don't distribute it to the CO3, which is wrong. You pretend there's a bracket in between them, and you distribute 3 to every single coefficient, okay? So let's go. 3, you have 2 NAs here, 2 times 2 is 6, 6 sodiums, and 3 times 1, 1 carbon, right? 1 times 3 is 3 carbons. And 3 times 3 is 9 oxygens. Okay, good. Alright, so let's try a combination of both brackets and coefficients. So how will we fix it? How will we approach this question? First, you would just start by applying this coefficient of a coefficient. That's why I call them. You can just distribute this to the terms inside the bracket, because a bracket only extends here. If the bracket was like here, you would like expand the 2 to these 2 to the Ca3 as well. But since the bracket ends here, you distribute it to only these 2 elements. So let's distribute it. That will get you to this new equation here, a new formula here. And it's the same thing, you just distributed the 2 to these elements. And now you have the 2 here. Now it's similar to this question, just distribute the 2 to each of these elements subscript. That will give us 6 calciums, 4 phosphorus, and 16 oxygens. Okay. And then this one, it's just a bit more complicated, but I think it's much easier than the ones that we did above, because there's no bracket, there's no coefficient. You just count the subscripts. Be careful, okay? So 66 carbons, 14 hydrogens, 3 fluorine, and then 3 nitrogens, 4 oxygens, and 1 sulfur. Okay, let's go to this example here. This is also very simple. First of all, as I said earlier, you always start by distributing the brackets, okay? So when you don't start by distributing the coefficients. You start by distributing inside the brackets. A coefficient under another coefficient, just distribute that first, and then we can count later. Okay? So this just equates to this. Okay? Because the bracket ends here. So now it's easy to count. You have 2 irons, 3. The S is optional. Like the S depends on what your teacher likes, but it's safer to put iron without an S, but it's acceptable either way. So 3 sulfur and 12 oxygen. Okay. Now to our last example. It's still very this is probably the level you would see on your exams, with your with the coefficient and the bracket combined. That's essentially probably the exam level of grade 9. When you get to high grades, you won't go much more than this. You don't need that much. So although counting atoms is a very fundamental and important skill when you're balancing, for example, when you're balancing next year, you need to know how to count. But for counting, you don't need to, max out on that too much, because as long as you know how to count accurately, you're fine. You don't have to work with these crazy brackets or numbers you see. Okay, practically, because this is what you typically see. So first of all, distribute that 2 to the bracket. Now you distribute the 2 to all of these. So okay. So that would be your sort of final equation, and from here you can just count. So you have 4 nitrogens, 8 hydrogen, 4 chromium. I'm not sure I spelled it correctly or not. And 2 oxygens. Okay, that is the end of the lesson for counting atoms. If you want to try, there's also lots of worksheets posted. Feel free to try them. Okay, if you guys have any questions, feel free to visit our website, our Discord server, or email us and shoot us an email. We'll respond to you right away.